The gunshot that shattered the saloon window sent Aurora Grayson diving beneath a poker table, cards scattering like autumn leaves across the dusty floor of Willow Creek's only establishment worth mentioning. It was 1876 in the Montana Territory, and Aurora had learned quickly that a schoolteacher's salary couldn't compete with a lucky hand and five-card draw, not if she wanted to save enough to buy back her family's ranch from the bankers who'd seized it after her father's death. "Damn you, woman," a voice bellowed. "That was my money." Aurora's heart pounded against her ribs as she crawled backward, her blue calico dress catching on a nail protruding from the floorboard. The burly man who'd accused her of cheating, Silas Thornton, a cattle driver with a reputation for violence, flipped the table, exposing her hiding spot. "I didn't cheat," she said, struggling to keep her voice steady as she rose to her feet. At 22, Aurora had developed a talent for cards, a skill her father had taught her during long winter nights. "You lost fair and square." Silas lunged forward, grabbing her wrist with enough force to bruise. "Nobody beats me 3 hands in a row without stacking the deck." The saloon had fallen silent, patrons stepping back from the confrontation. A few men chuckled nervously, exchanging glances that made Aurora's blood run cold. Not one of them would intervene. She'd seen this before, the way men in these parts stood aside when violence erupted, especially when it involved a woman who'd stepped beyond her proper place. "Let go of me," Aurora demanded, trying to twist free. "Take your wounded pride elsewhere." His face contorted with rage. Silas dragged her toward the back door, and panic bloomed in her chest. "Help!" she screamed, her voice high and desperate. "Somebody help me." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "Little lady's got herself in a fix," one man commented, taking a swig of whiskey. "Should have stuck to teaching letters to children instead of playing a man's game," another added, prompting more chuckles. Silas pushed Aurora through the door into the narrow hallway that led to the storeroom. "Time to teach you some respect," he growled. She screamed again, louder, as he shoved her into the small room and slammed the door shut. The windowless space smelled of stale beer and tobacco. Aurora backed away, searching frantically for anything she could use as a weapon. Outside in the alley, Levi Morgan dismounted his dappled gray stallion, wincing at the pain in his side where a bullet had grazed him 2 days prior. At 28, he'd spent enough years as a deputy marshal to recognize a cry for help when he heard one. He'd been tracking a gang of cattle rustlers for weeks, following them to this small town. His plan had been to rest for the night before continuing his pursuit in the morning. The scream came again, muffled but unmistakable, followed by raucous laughter from inside the saloon. Levi's jaw tightened. He'd seen too much injustice in the territories, too many people looking away when they should have stepped forward. He approached the back entrance of the saloon, hand resting on the Colt revolver at his hip. Another scream pierced the evening air. "I hear you," he said under his breath, then raised his boot and kicked the door with enough force to splinter the frame. The hallway was dimly lit by a single oil lamp. A burly man with a red beard had a woman pressed against a storeroom wall, his hand clamped over her mouth. She was fighting fiercely, but he outweighed her by at least 100 pounds. "Let her go," Levi commanded, his voice cutting through the air like a whip. Silas turned, momentarily surprised, then sneered. "Mind your own business, stranger. This doesn't concern you." Levi drew his revolver in one fluid motion. "I'm making it my business. Step away from the lady. Now." Something in his tone, or perhaps the steady hand holding the Colt, made Silas hesitate. He released Aurora, who gasped for air, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and relief. "She's a cheater," Silas spat, "taking a man's hard-earned money." "That's so?" Levi asked, glancing at Aurora while keeping his gun trained on Silas. "Madam, did you cheat this man?" Aurora straightened her dress, a fierce dignity in her bearing despite her disheveled appearance. "I did not. He's a poor loser with an inflated sense of entitlement." A ghost of a smile touched Levi's lips. "That's what I figured." To Silas, he said, "You've got 2 choices. Walk away now and forget whatever grievance you think you have, or I'll escort you to the town jail to cool off." "Who the hell are you to?" Levi flipped back his coat to reveal a silver star pinned to his vest. "Deputy U.S. Marshal Levi Morgan." Your choice just narrowed to one option. Walk. Silas's face darkened with rage, but self-preservation won out. He shouldered past Levi, muttering curses under his breath. "Are you hurt, madam?" Levi asked, holstering his weapon once Silas had disappeared into the main room of the saloon. Aurora leaned against the wall, her knees suddenly weak as the danger passed. "No, thanks to you." She studied him, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of a summer storm. A thin line of dried blood showed at his side where his shirt had pulled loose from his waistband. "You're injured." "It's nothing," he said dismissively. "Just a scratch from a previous disagreement." "It needs tending," she insisted. "I have a room at the boarding house. I can clean that wound properly as a thank you for your intervention." Levi hesitated. He hadn't planned to stay in town longer than necessary. The rustlers were putting distance between them with every passing hour. But the wound was throbbing, and the woman's determined expression suggested argument would be futile. "I'm Aurora Grayson," she said, extending her hand. He took it, surprised by the strength in her grip. "Levi Morgan. Though I suppose I already announced that." "Yes, rather dramatically," she replied, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Do you often kick down doors to rescue damsels in distress, Marshal Morgan?" "Only on Tuesdays," he said with unexpected humor. "And it's just Levi? The badge is temporary." They exited through the back door, avoiding the main saloon where curious eyes would be watching. The evening air was cool against Aurora's flushed skin as they walked toward the boarding house, her heart still racing from the encounter, though whether from fear or the presence of the tall marshal beside her, she couldn't quite determine. Mrs. Holbrook, the boarding house proprietress, raised her eyebrows at the sight of Aurora returning with a man in tow, but said nothing as they climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor. Aurora's room was small but neat, with a single bed, washstand, and trunk for her belongings. She gestured for Levi to sit on the room's only chair while she poured water from a pitcher into a basin. "You'll need to remove your shirt," she said, her back to him as she gathered clean cloths from her trunk. Levi unbuttoned his shirt, wincing as the fabric pulled away from the wound. It wasn't deep, but it had reopened, a thin line of blood staining his skin. Aurora turned, medical supplies in hand, and paused. The marshal's broad chest was crisscrossed with scars, testament to a life lived dangerously. She swallowed hard and approached, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand. "How did this happen?" she asked, gently cleaning the wound. "Cattle rustlers I've been tracking. Got careless 2 nights ago, and one of them winged me." He watched her work, noting the practiced efficiency of her movements. "You've done this before." "My father ran a ranch north of here. Injuries were common." Her voice held a note of sadness. "I lost him last winter. The bank took everything after he died." "I'm sorry," Levi said, and meant it. "Is that why you're playing cards in saloons? Trying to earn back your land?" Aurora's hands stilled momentarily. "Is that judgment I hear, Marshal?" "Just an observation," he replied. "Though I should mention that winning consistently in a place like that puts you at risk, as you discovered tonight." She applied a salve to his wound with perhaps more pressure than necessary, drawing a sharp inhale from him. "I'm aware of the risks. I've been teaching at the school here, but the salary is barely enough to live on, let alone save anything substantial. The ranch means that much to you." Aurora secured a bandage in place, her fingers lingering briefly on his skin. "It's all I have left of my family. My mother died when I was young. It was just father and me for years." She stepped back, wiping her hands on a cloth. "There. That should heal cleanly if you keep it dry." Levi buttoned his shirt, studying her face. In the lamplight, he could see the determination in her eyes, the proud set of her chin despite the vulnerability in her expression. Something about her stirred him in a way he hadn't felt in years. "Thank you," he said, standing. "I should find lodging for the night." "Mrs. Holbrook has vacant rooms," Aurora replied. "Though fair warning, the walls are thin, and she serves the worst coffee west of the Mississippi." A smile tugged at his lips. "I've survived worse." "I've no doubt." She walked him to the door, then hesitated. "I never properly thank you for what you did tonight." Not many men would have interfered. Not many men have much courage these days, Levi said quietly. "Good night, Miss Grayson." "Aurora," she corrected, after facing down a drunken cattle driver together. "I think formalities are unnecessary." "Aurora," he repeated, her name feeling right on his tongue. "Good night." As he descended the stairs, Levi knew his plan to leave at dawn was already changing. The rustlers could wait another day. Morning arrived with the persistent crowing of a rooster somewhere behind the boarding house. Aurora dressed quickly, pinning her auburn hair into a simple knot at the nape of her neck. Today was Saturday, no school to teach, which meant she could focus on her other priority, visiting the bank to check on the status of her father's debt. She nearly collided with Levi in the narrow hallway. He was dressed in clean clothes, his dark hair still damp from washing. "Good morning," she said, startled by his presence. "I thought you might have left already." "I have business in town," he replied, not mentioning that his business had materialized only after meeting her. "Mind if I walk with you?" They descended the stairs together, drawing a knowing look from Mrs. Holbrook as they passed through the dining room. Aurora felt a flush rising to her cheeks, but held her head high. Outside, the main street of Willow Creek was already bustling with morning activity. Wagons rolled past, shopkeepers swept their boardwalks, and the smell of fresh bread wafted from the bakery. "Where are you headed?" Levi asked, falling into step beside her. "The bank," she replied. "I need to speak with Mr. Rutherford about my father's loan." Levi's expression darkened slightly. "Preston Rutherford?" "Yes. Do you know him?" "I know of him. He has a reputation for foreclosing on properties and then selling them to the railroad or cattle companies for a tidy profit." Aurora's stomach clenched. "That's what I fear he's planning with my father's ranch. It sits on good grazing land with a year-round creek." They stopped outside the red brick building that housed the Willow Creek Bank and Trust. Aurora hesitated, gathering her courage. "Would you like me to accompany you?" Levi offered. She was tempted to accept, but shook her head. "Thank you, but this is something I need to handle myself. Perhaps we could meet for lunch after?" The cafe across the street serves decent food. "I'll be there at noon," he promised. Inside the bank, Aurora waited patiently while Mr. Rutherford finished with another customer. The banker was a portly man with thinning hair and cold eyes that never quite matched his practiced smile. "Miss Grayson," he said when he finally acknowledged her. "What brings you to my establishment today? Depositing your teacher's salary, perhaps?" "I've come to inquire about my father's loan," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "I'd like to know exactly how much is still owed and what arrangements might be made for me to repay it and reclaim our property." Rutherford's smile tightened. "My dear, I believe we've had this conversation before. The amount outstanding is substantial, far more than you could hope to repay on a teacher's salary." "I'm aware of that," Aurora said, "but I'm entitled to know the precise figure. And I believe the law allows for reasonable repayment arrangements." "The law," Rutherford chuckled, "gives banks considerable discretion in these matters. But very well." He pulled a ledger from his desk and made a show of consulting it. "The outstanding balance is $2,187.45, with interest accruing daily." Aurora tried not to flinch at the amount. It was even higher than she'd feared. "And if I were to make regular payments?" "We typically require at least 20% down payment to reinstate a foreclosed loan. That would be," he calculated quickly, "approximately $437. Do you have such a sum available, Miss Grayson?" She had exactly $212 hidden in her room money she'd saved and won over months of careful living and strategic card games. Not even half of what she needed. "I can raise it," she said with more confidence than she felt. "Will you give me 30 days? Rutherford's expression suggested he found her persistence amusing. 30 days? I suppose I could delay finalizing the sale for that long. Though I should mention I've had several interested parties inquire about the property already." "I'm sure you have," Aurora said, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from her voice. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Rutherford." Outside, she leaned against the building, taking deep breaths to calm her rising panic. $437 in 30 days. It seemed impossible. At noon, she met Levi at the cafe as planned. One look at her face told him the meeting hadn't gone well. "That bad?" he asked as they settled at a corner table. Aurora explained the situation, twisting her napkin in her hands as she spoke. "I don't know how I'll raise that much money so quickly." Levi studied her thoughtfully. "There's a poker tournament in Helena next week. The buy-in is steep, but the prize would more than cover what you need." She looked up sharply. "You're suggesting I gamble for my ranch?" "I'm suggesting you use your skills to your advantage," he corrected. "From what I saw last night, You're no amateur at cards. My father taught me, she admitted. Said a smart woman should always have a way to level the playing field. She frowned. But the buy-in, I could stake you, Levi said. I have some money saved. Why would you do that for someone you just met? His eyes held hers. Let's just say I recognize determination when I see it. And I've developed a healthy distrust of bankers like Rutherford. Aurora considered his offer. It was risky if she lost. She'd be in debt to Levi as well. But what choice did she have? If I accept, she said carefully, it would be as a business arrangement. I'd repay you regardless of the outcome. Agreed, Levi said, extending his hand across the table. She shook it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. Then it seems we have a partnership, Marshal Morgan. Over the next week, Aurora and Levi spent every evening preparing for the tournament. They commandeered a corner table at the saloon, deliberately keeping her wins modest to avoid attracting attention. During the days, Levi continued his inquiries about the cattle rustlers, gathering information while Aurora taught her students. They developed an easy companionship, their conversations ranging from books to horses to their respective childhoods, his in Pennsylvania before the war, hers on the Montana ranch she was fighting to reclaim. What about family? She asked one evening as they walked back to the boarding house under a star-filled sky. Is there anyone waiting for your return somewhere? Levi shook his head. My parents died years ago. Had a brother who went east after the war, lost touch with him. The Marshal Service has been my only constant. That sounds lonely, Aurora said softly. It can be, he admitted. But it suits me. Or it did, until recently. She glanced at him, catching the intensity in his gaze before he looked away. Something was changing between them, a current of attraction neither had acknowledged, but both could feel. The night before they were to leave for Helena, Levi found Aurora on the small porch behind the boarding house, staring at the distant mountains. Having second thoughts? He asked, joining her at the railing. A few, she confessed. What if I'm not good enough? The stakes are so high. You're good, he assured her. Better than most men I've seen play, and I've seen plenty. She turned to face him, moonlight silvering her auburn hair. Thank you for believing in me, Levi. Few people have, since my father died. Aurora, he began, then hesitated, struggling to find words for feelings he hadn't expected to develop. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted whatever he'd been about to say. Mrs. Holbrook appeared at the door, her expression disapproving. Miss Grayson, it's getting late. Not proper for a young lady to be out alone with a gentleman at this hour. Of course, Mrs. Holbrook, Aurora replied, suppressing a smile at being treated like a wayward schoolgirl at 22. Good night, Levi. Good night, he echoed, watching her disappear inside, the moment between them broken but not forgotten. The journey to Helena took a full day by stagecoach. They arrived dusty and tired, checking into a modest hotel near the venue where the tournament would be held. Aurora had insisted on separate rooms to maintain propriety, though the clerk's knowing smile suggested their arrangement was transparent. That evening, they walked through the busy streets of the territorial capital, Aurora nervously rehearsing card combinations and strategies, while Levi offered reassurance. You'll do fine, he said as they paused outside a dress shop window. Just remember what we practiced. Keep your emotions hidden, watch the other players, and don't get drawn into playing hands you should fold. Aurora nodded absently, her attention caught by a blue silk dress in the window. It was far more elegant than anything she'd worn since her mother's death. Levi followed her gaze. Would you like to go in? You might want something special for tomorrow night's game. I couldn't possibly, she began. Consider it an investment in our venture, he said. Sometimes appearance matters in these games. Confidence, too. An hour later, they left with the dress and matching shoes wrapped in brown paper. Aurora felt guilty at the extravagance, but Levi had insisted, his eyes warming appreciatively when she'd emerged from the dressing room. That night, alone in her room, Aurora laid out the dress and thought about the man who'd bought it for her. In just over a week, Levi Morgan had become someone she trusted implicitly, someone whose presence made her feel both stronger and more vulnerable. It was dangerous territory. He was a lawman with no permanent home, and her heart had already weathered enough loss. The tournament began the next afternoon in the grand ballroom of Helena's finest hotel. Aurora, dressed in her new blue silk, felt conspicuous among the predominantly male players, many of whom eyed her with amusement or disdain. "Look at that," one man commented loudly as she took her seat. "They're letting ladies play now. Must be desperate for our money." Levi, watching from the sidelines, tensed at the remark, but Aurora simply smiled and arranged her chips neatly before her. She'd heard worse in smaller games. The first few rounds went well. Aurora played conservatively, folding more often than not, letting the others underestimate her while she studied their habits. By evening, when the field had narrowed to 2 tables, she'd amassed a respectable stack of chips. During a break, Levi brought her a cup of water. "You're doing brilliantly," he murmured. "But that fellow with the silver watch, he's been watching you too closely. I think he's trying to read your tells." Aurora sipped the water gratefully. "I noticed. Don't worry, I've been giving him false ones." Levi's eyebrows rose. "False tells? That's not something I taught you." A mischievous smile played across her lips. "My father did. Said every good player needs a few tricks the others don't expect." He laughed softly. "You are full of surprises, Aurora Grayson." As the tournament progressed into the night, the atmosphere grew tenser. Aurora found herself at the final table with 5 men, including the one with the silver watch, a cattle baron named Jameson, and, to her dismay, Silas Thornton, the man who'd accosted her in Willow Creek. Silas recognized her immediately, his eyes narrowing with malice. Well, if it isn't the cheating schoolmarm from Willow Creek." "Mr. Thornton," she acknowledged coolly. "Still blaming others for your poor play, I see." Several players chuckled, further fueling Silas's anger. He played recklessly after that, eventually losing all his chips on a foolish bluff that Aurora called without hesitation. As midnight approached, only Aurora and Jameson remained. The prize money, nearly $1,000, sat in the center of the table alongside their final hand. Aurora looked at her cards. 2 pair, queens and tens. Good, but not unbeatable. Jameson pushed his remaining chips into the pot. "All in," he announced with confidence. "Time to send you home to your needlework, miss." Aurora met his gaze steadily, trying to read past his bravado. Was he bluffing? Or did he have the straight he'd been chasing? Her rancher father's legacy hung in the balance. She glanced at Levi, who stood at the edge of the crowd, his expression giving nothing away. This was her decision alone. With a deep breath, Aurora pushed her chips forward. "I call." Jameson's face fell slightly as he turned over his cards. A pair of aces, but nothing else. Aurora revealed her 2 pair, and the room erupted in cheers and groans as the dealer officially declared her the winner. Dazed, she accepted congratulations from the other players, all except Jameson, who stalked away without a word. Levi approached, his face alight with pride. "You did it," he said, squeezing her hand. "You've saved your ranch." Aurora clutched the leather pouch containing her winnings. "We did it. I couldn't have gotten here without you." They left the hotel, both too exhilarated to sleep despite the late hour. The streets of Helena were quiet. Most establishments closed save for a few saloons still glowing with lamplight. "I can't believe it's really happening," Aurora said as they walked. "After so many months of thinking I'd lost everything." "You earned this," Levi replied. "Your father would be proud." She stopped, turning to face him. "What will you do now? Continue tracking those rustlers?" The question hung between them, laden with unspoken implications. "That was my plan," he admitted. "But plans can change." Aurora studied his face in the moonlight, seeing the conflict there. What if there was a reason to delay that plan? Or modify it? Levi stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Is there such a reason, Aurora?" Her heart raced as it hadn't even during the highest stakes of the poker game. "I think you know there is," she whispered. He reached up, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "I've been fighting this since the moment I kicked down that door." "Fighting what?" she asked, though she knew the answer. "The feeling that I found something I wasn't even looking for." His voice was rough with emotion. "Someone who makes me question everything I thought I wanted." Aurora leaned into his touch. "And what do you want now?" Instead of answering, Levi lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle at first, hesitant, but when she responded, her hands sliding up to his shoulders, her body moving closer, the kiss deepened into something urgent and revelatory. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Aurora rested her forehead against his chest, listening to the rapid beating of his heart. "That's not an answer," she murmured, though her smile belied her words. Levi laughed softly, his arms tightening around her. "Isn't it? I want you, Aurora. I want more time with you. I want to see what this could become. Even though I live in a small town and you're always on the move, even though we barely know each other, I know enough," he said. "I know you're brave and determined and smarter than any woman or man I've met. I know that when I'm with you, I feel like I've found a home I didn't realize I was searching for." Aurora looked up at him, moonlight reflecting in her eyes. "Come back to Willow Creek with me. Help me rebuild my ranch. Stay. For a while at least. And the rustlers? Will there always be rustlers, Levi?" Always another chase, another reason to move on. He considered this, his hand absently stroking her back. "I could telegraph the marshal's office, request reassignment to the Montana Territory. There's plenty of work for a deputy marshal in these parts." Hope blossomed in Aurora's chest. "You would do that? For the chance to see where this leads?" His smile was tender as he brushed his lips against hers again. "Yes, Aurora. I would do that and more." They returned to Willow Creek 2 days later, Aurora's winnings secured in a bank draft rather than cash at Levi's insistence. Mr. Rutherford's face when she presented it was a moment Aurora knew she would treasure for years to come. "I believe this covers the down payment with interest," she said sweetly, placing the draft on his desk. "I'll expect the deed to be transferred back to my name immediately, and I'll make arrangements for regular payments on the balance." Rutherford sputtered, clearly having already promised the property to someone else, but legally he had no choice but to comply. Over the following months, Aurora and Levi worked side by side to restore the Grayson Ranch. She continued teaching through the spring term, using her salary to purchase supplies while Levi repaired fences and outbuildings. His reassignment to the local territory meant he could pursue his lawman duties while helping her establish a small but growing herd of cattle. Word of Aurora's poker tournament victory had spread, earning her respect albeit grudging in some quarters throughout the region. No one dared challenge her claim to the land, especially with a deputy marshal now frequently seen on the property. As summer ripened into autumn, Levi built an addition to the ranch house, a bedroom with large windows overlooking the creek where Aurora's mother had planted wildflowers years before. The evening he finished it, he asked Aurora to join him there, nervousness evident in his usually confident demeanor. "It's beautiful, Levi," she said, admiring the craftsmanship of the new room. "You've made this house feel like a home again." "That's what I wanted to talk about," he said, taking her hands in his. "Home? I've never had one, not really. Not since I was a boy. But these past months, working alongside you, falling asleep to the sound of your breathing, waking up to your smile. I found my home, Aurora. It's wherever you are." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small ring, a simple gold band with a single pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained. "I've carried it with me for years, waiting for the right person to give it to. Aurora Grayson, would you marry me?" Tears welled in Aurora's eyes as she looked from the ring to the man holding it, the man who'd kicked down a door for her, who'd believed in her when no one else did, who'd worked alongside her to reclaim not just her land but her future. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Levi Morgan. I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that promised a lifetime of partnership and love. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Willow Creek, with Aurora's students throwing flower petals and Levi's fellow lawmen standing as witnesses. Mrs. Holbrook cried openly, claiming she'd known all along they were meant for each other. That night, as they lay together in their new bedroom, moonlight streaming through the windows, Aurora traced the scar on Levi's side, the wound that had first brought them together. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Kicking down that door that night? Taking a chance on a schoolteacher with a poker habit?" Levi gathered her closer, his lips finding hers in the darkness. "Never," he murmured against her mouth. "Best decision I ever made." Outside, the Montana wind swept across the plains, carrying the promise of winter and new beginnings. On the Grayson Morgan Ranch, a lamp burned late into the night as two people who had found each other against all odds celebrated the home they had built together, a home founded on courage, trust, and love that had begun the moment a cowboy said, "I hear you," and kicked down a door.